What is up, everybody? My name is Anthony, and in this video, we are going to talk about subdomains, what they are, what they can do for your business, whether you need them, and how to use them. So we're going to also talk about how to install them on your cPanel account and how to install WordPress on your subdomain. So karibu sana, let's get started. So basically, a subdomain is a subdirectory of your website. It's, for those who have never seen a subdomain, you probably have. It's like, for instance, our domain name is hostpoa.co.ke. So doing a subdomain for us would be something like test.hostpoa.co.ke. Now, normally you'd have not something like test, you'd use something like shop dot or like thika dot Nairobi dot and subdomains basically are normally used to distinguish a particular page from the content of the main website. It's usually seen as a sub website, a smaller website, or a branch website to the main site, and it's normally used in complete isolation, not complete, but in a level of isolation from the main website. Now, for instance, the use for, like on Hostpoa, would use a subdomain for something like if we had a shop section. So let's say we already have described who we are and so on, and we want to lead people towards the shop section, and let's say the shop section is like on a different, running on a different software, then installing it on shop.hostpoa.co.ke would actually be a better idea. Okay, so do you need a subdomain yourself? That's a question you probably are asking yourself. And you'd use a subdomain when you have a complete separation. You want to have a bit of a separation between your main site and the sub-site. So for instance, let's say, as I've described, let's say you're running your website on, it's a HTML website, like your main site is HTML based, and you want to run a blog, which the best blogging software out there is WordPress, and you'd want to, that they do not interfere with each other. Now, for your case, you'd probably need a subdomain, which would be like your web, blog.yourwebsite.com. So that would be one use. Another use would be, for instance, if you're running your own website on whatever you've built it on, and you have a shop section, but that shop section is being powered by something like Shopify, and you want to use Shopify, but using your own domain, but that Shopify is not loading directly on your domain, then you would create your subdomain, as I'm going to show you how to. Then after that, after creating the subdomain, you would direct the A records to point to Shopify's account. You connect your Shopify account to that subdomain. So you'd essentially continue running your website as the normal way you do, but your Shopify account would have your domain name as well, but on a smaller section of it. So between a subdomain and a subdirectory, what's the difference? So let me first describe what a subdirectory is. So for hostpoa.co.ke, if I did hostpoa.co.ke/blog, that's a subdirectory. So let's say if I would choose to maybe install my blog on hostpoa.co.ke/blog, or choose to install it on blog.hostpoa.co.ke. Now, both would have the same implementation. There's no big difference in them internally in terms of the file systems and so on. There's no big functionality difference in doing that. The only challenge is, for instance, if you use a subdomain, Google is going to identify it as a sort of a more separate site than the main site if you use a subdomain. But if you use it as a subdirectory, Google would know that this is a subdirectory of your website, and therefore, in terms of ranking on Google, if you're really depending on the subdomain or that separate website to provide reference a lot for SEO purposes. If you don't know what I mean, do a bit of like SEO search and look for referring and what a referring link, the kind of thing that a referring link does, you'll understand what I mean. But if you're using, if you really are depending on your blog to provide a lot of referring juice, link juice to your main site, then I would advise that you use a subdirectory. That's like hostpod.co.ke/blog instead of blog.hostpod.co.ke. But for all other uses, I think it's cleaner and more efficient if you use a subdomain. And it's really a good way of being able to keep things separate and well organized. And it's also going to be easier when you're talking to anyone about your website. Something else, probably if you are having multiple locations and you'd want all of them to have separate identities, but have one uniting factor. So let's say you have an office in Burundi, another office in Rwanda, another office in all of these other places. You want them to be separated by subdomains. That will help a lot in identifying that I am on the Rwandese site of this business and not on the homepage. And so therefore you can have the homepage probably as the Kenyan site if your headquarters are in Kenya, but have all the other countries take subdomains, and they will still have the same identity, but have the localizing factor being the subdomain. Okay, so I don't know whether subdomains would work for you or not. I hope I've been able to answer the question of do you need a subdomain. So let's get into like creating a subdomain and how to use it. So let's jump right into the computer for that. Okay, so now I am on cPanel, and I have loaded cPanel by going to this domain, siafuatu.com/cPanel. That is CPANEL, cPanel. So this is the cPanel. Just in case you have no idea what the cPanel is, it's basically the interface in which you control most web hosting packages. And for us at HostPoa, we use cPanel. So now on cPanel, once you enter in your username and password, you'd come here. Then you'd navigate to subdomains in this section here. And you can also navigate to the subdomains by, just in case you can't find it, just start typing the word subdomain. And it would basically take you there. So I would come to subdomains here. Once I have loaded this subdomain window, I would put in the name of the subdomain section I want. Now you just need to put just the name, not with any dots or anything else. So for instance, if you want shop.siafuatu.com or shop.yourdomain.com, you do shop. Just do shop. Then click anywhere outside of that window so that the document root section can auto-populate with the full directory of that subdomain. And click create. And there you have it. You have a brand new domain name. And for me, it's shop.siafuatu.com. You'll have to wait for it to finish loading as I'm waiting for mine. And once it's created, you have a subdomain that is ready to be used. Okay, so you'll have this screen notification showing that you've successfully registered a subdomain. Now the next thing you want to do, and I would like to show you, is you probably want to install something. That would be something like Wordpress, for instance, if you're doing a blog. And so I'm going to demonstrate that just now. So if you want to create a blog, if you're on our web hosting, you will have a cPanel that looks like this. And if you navigate near to the bottom, you will see WordPress here and WordPress here. I normally like using Softaculous app installer. So click on WordPress there, and it should navigate you to the app installer for Softaculous. Once you get here, you'd click on the Install Now button, and it will lead you to this window where you need to fill in a number of things. Now, it's important that you take into consideration a number of things so that you install it correctly. First, is that HTTP, you have an option of either HTTP /www or just HTTP on its own. Ordinarily, when you install a subdomain, it will not come with a HTTPS automatically. It needs about an hour for the subdomain to install. So when beginning, you need to choose HTTP colon // or HTTP colon // dot. Now let's choose the www dot for ours, and so that will be Siafuatu. The next thing that you really need to be careful about is that you will have two options here, and the choose domain. You can either choose to install your subdomain on siafuatu.com or your root domain. Yours won't be siafuatu.com, obviously, but it will be your root domain. Now, since you're installing it on a subdomain, it's important that you choose the shop or your subdomain and choose your subdomain from the list that is listed here. Then the other thing that is really important is that you remove anything that would be in the directory section. That's because you do not want it to be shop.siafuatu.com / anything else. You want it to be installed on shop.siafuatu.com, not on a directory underneath it. Okay, then the rest of this is the way you'd install WordPress. So I'm going to continue with mine. You can watch. So I'm going to choose my site name as shop. And I'm going to call this subdomain of siafuatu.com. Then I'll choose my username. It's important not to use admin because that makes it slightly vulnerable. So you want to use a different name. Let me choose Siafu for me. Then I'm going to leave the other details as such, but I need to change the password. This is really important because by clicking this, it generates a strong password, and you need strong passwords, especially for WordPress, since WordPress is normally targeted for by a lot of attacks. Finally, I would finish this with clicking the install button, and it should start installing on this subdomain. Now this will take roughly around a minute for it to finish, and once it's done, you're going to have a WordPress installation created on your subdomain. Okay, as you can see, the subdomain has been created on shop.siafuatu.com, and if we navigate there, it will show that we have a subdomain that has been created, and here it is, and a subdomain of siafuatu.com. And to get to the WordPress dashboard, you just click on shop.siafuatu.com /WP admin. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have benefited from it.